Well, we know the Prime Minister now is going to overhaul the legislated Stage 3 tax cuts. Now, we won't get the detail for a couple of days, but he was promising for months and months and months there would be no changes. Here's a reminder of that promise.
I can confirm that we haven't changed our position.
We have no change to our plans. Tax cuts will happen in July.
We haven't changed our position. I've said we haven't changed our position. We haven't changed our position on the Stage 3 tax cuts. We have not changed our position on Stage 3 tax cuts. They've been legislated. We support them. Our position hasn't changed.
How does he survive breaking a promise like that? This morning, the Prime Minister hinted all taxpayers are going to benefit. Have a look.
I support tax cuts and everyone will be getting a tax cut. What we're doing is looking at how we can help low and middle income earners. Middle Australia particularly is doing it really tough.
Let's bring in Nationals leader David Littleproud, who joins me from Roma in Queensland. How can we look at the Prime Minister and trust him when you look at those two grabs back to back and that broken promise?
Well, it's not his first and won't be his last. He also promised us that our electricity bills would be $275 cheaper, and that hasn't come to fruition and won't come to fruition with their renewables energy policy. The Prime Minister's been very clear that he supported this, and I think we've got to also appreciate that Stage 1 and 2 were about tax cuts to low and middle income earners. And this was about a structural adjustment to our taxation system. And if you're going to make changes, it should be about the long-term structural adjustment of bracket creep, not short-term support for cost of living crisis that he and his government have created. And this is where he's going to have to explain the long-term strategic direction around taxation policy as well, which he's failed to do. And we'll watch and see with great interest about his explanation how he's going to cut this. But to take his Australian Labor Party to Canberra, it's going to cost the Australian taxpayer nearly $500,000 when he can't change a thing anyway. He couldn't do it for another couple of weeks until we're in Parliament and we're able to vote on legislation. Why he had to bring them back and cost the taxpayer that? And now we also find out that he wants to put in 53 extra politicians that cost us $62 million extra a year. I don't think he's got his priorities right, and he hasn't learned, despite waking up on the 1st of January, that this was his focus, cost of living. He hasn't quite understood the strategic direction that he and his government need to take.
We've got a by-election in 5 weeks. I mean, you can only presume Labor's been doing heavy polling, and that polling must be telling them, I think, that it would be popular for the Prime Minister to come out and announce before that by-election that the top end of town's not going to get the tax cuts that they thought they might get.
Oh, and so too about calling a snap caucus meeting that costs the taxpayer $500,000 to show that he's doing something. Where's he been for the last 18 months? He woke up on the 1st of January and said, oh, Australians are doing it tough, finally. Well, he was focused of spending $450 million on a failed referendum. This is measures around not just taxation, but around sensible policy levers on cost of living. And you look at the drivers of inflation. The drivers of inflation are fixed costs now. Discretionary costs and expenditures gone. We've stopped going to Jerry Harvey and buying the TVs. But what continues to keep inflation high and sticky is energy and food. And they're intertwined because much of our food processors are paying 3-4 times what they were a couple of years ago. And this is where the government's gone missing. And now, in a moment of panic and crisis of Anthony Albanese's leadership, he's now looking like Julia Gillard, and he's reinventing himself after the 1st of January and going, I have to do something because the polling's telling me. You've had 18 months, Prime Minister, and you missed the opportunities, you missed pulling the policy levers that would have meant that you didn't have to break promises. And unfortunately, this is all not just about Dunkley, but it's about him and his political survival over the next 12 months.
We saw last week that a pint of beer is going to hit $14, $15. I know you've been putting together a list of measures that you think could ease the cost of living. I think a proposal to expand Parliament, you could knock that on the head, adding another 53 politicians.
Yep.
What sort of things have you come up with that you think could have immediate impact on people's cost of living and their budgets at home?
Well, if you go to exactly what I've just said, the big drivers, food, we've been calling for over 12 months for the government to bring forward their scheduled reviews on the grocery code of conduct. They ignored us. We said, why don't we have an investigation into the supermarkets? When you look at the evidence about fresh meat and fresh produce, there needs to be someone exploring that, and if they've done the wrong thing, hold them to account. Increasing the penalties, divestiture powers. I said that 12 months ago the government would help vote for that. We've also said scrap the fresh food tax. They're actually going to tax our farmers $153 million to help our foreign competitors import their product into Australia, put on the shelf to compete with Australian farmers. I mean, we don't get that paid for us when we send our produce to be sold around the world. Why would we pay for our foreign competitors who are posing the biosecurity risk to our country? Why are we posing that on our farmers who will have to pass it on to you? Give us back the workers we need. Our agricultural sector is working at about 60% capacity because they took away the ag visa and the unions have wrecked the PALM scheme that means it's unviable for farmers to use. They're taking away the tools we very need in the water. We need to get rid of these water buybacks and stick to the Murray-Darling Basin plan, not take another 450 gigalitres away from productive agriculture, which drives up your price. We need to pause and plan this reckless race to 82% renewables, which we're tearing down prime agricultural land to put solar panels and wind turbines and transmission lines on, and just give us our fair share of infrastructure for roads and rail. That over $20 billion's been stripped out since they got in, because if we don't have productive arterials to get our product from a paddock to your plate, you're going to pay. They're common sense solutions that aren't going to cost us a lot. In fact, they're policy levers. And instead of flooding the economy with money, we're flooding it with common sense. And that's what the Nationals will be saying when we go back in February. Prime Minister, we've tried to be constructive. We've given you a chance 12 months ago to take on the supermarkets. I wanted a National Energy Summit to have a look at all the options. And when you got even the union saying, and the South Australian Premier backing us on nuclear, well, why wouldn't you actually pause and actually do this properly? We need some common sense brought to this, and unfortunately we're not getting it. We're getting ideology that doesn't meet the practical reality of what's being ripped out of people's wallets.
Scott Morrison, you served in Cabinet with him. He's decided he's going to walk away from politics next month. He'll be live on Paul Murray's show at 9 tonight for his only interview. How do you think history will see the Prime Ministership of Scott Morrison?
Yeah, I think we'll obviously get to that juncture now that he's leaving Parliament. There's obviously been a lot of commentary. It's a great achievement to become Prime Minister of this great nation. To be the highest elected office holder in this country should be something anyone that gets there should be proud of. And I wish he and his family all the best in their new endeavours. He faced a lot of challenges, whether it be natural disasters or whether it be the pandemic. Our nation owes anyone that gives public service a great debt of gratitude, and I think no matter where the pundits land on his prime ministership, it's a great achievement, and he should be proud of the fact that he made it, but he made a difference to our country.
You wish him well?
Oh, of course, and I wish he and his family all the best, and obviously this is a new endeavour for him and his family, and I think when you know it's time and you don't have that fire in the belly, your first and primary responsibility is the people in your electorate, and no matter whatever position you hold, if you don't have that fire in the belly to swing for your electorate, then you shouldn't be there, and he's made that determination, and if that's where he is, it's a right one, and I hope he has a successful post-political career.